And now to our next conversation. MSMEs play a major role in most economies, particularly in developing countries. So SMEs account for the majority of businesses worldwide and are important contributors to job creation. Let's get a sense of MSME funding in Africa in 2022 and get an outlook for 2023. Join us now is Shina Arugundade, CEO of Trade Lender. Join us via Zoom. Great to have you on the program.
Thank you very much, Ladi. Thank you for having me on the program.
Yeah, so what's your assessment of MSME funding in 2022? Do you think at some point the taps were turned off?
I think I'd like to start by giving kudos to SMEs in Nigeria and across Africa. They've been very resilient. They've survived recession, survived pandemic, most of surviving insecurity and even global inflation and even inflation here in Africa. Well, across Africa, these guys contribute over 90% to over 90% of the jobs we have, and they contribute, for instance, in Nigeria, they contribute 50% of the GDP. But still, they don't have enough. I think there is now more focus on them. So the taps are not being closed, but the taps are not as open as we would love them to be. There still needs to be conscious efforts to support this guy. Take for instance, in Nigeria, the Nigerian Institute of Economic Research says 73% of SMEs in Nigeria, they get the money for their businesses personally. They fund the businesses personally. So a lot of them hardly have access to financing. It is also worth to note that across Africa, the ratio of loans to private sector is generally low. In Nigeria, for instance, is 12%. The ratio of loans to the GDP in Nigeria is 12% compared to other countries, although there are still countries in Africa that have over 100%, like of South Africa. But there needs to be more focus. Today, we have focus from private sector, the IFC, the federal government are starting to do some things in Nigeria. We are starting to see specific loans through the SMEDAN, through the AG, SMEIS, NILSA, and the likes. And banks today in Nigeria and even across Africa are starting to have heads of SMEs whose focus is mostly to provide funding to these SMEs even as they go forward. But the gap across Africa is still large. Across Africa, we still have a gap of over $150 billion. In Nigeria alone, we have a gap of 13 trillion naira, and that's over $32 billion. Yeah.
And what are you seeing on the horizon for MSME funding in 2023? What tailwinds are you seeing and headwinds?
I think I'll start with the headwinds. Take for instance, in Nigeria, it's an election year. So a lot of things will be dependent on the elections. But across Africa, we still have a lot of regulatory constraints, financial infrastructure, recovery is still an issue. So a lot of these lending to SMEs is still considered high risk, even though these guys are much. Across Africa, we have over 50 million of them to try and building day by day. But we are hoping that the year, most of these things will be worked on. That will have more tailwinds, especially with the coming of more fintechs in the space, trying to provide funding. Like I said, the gap in Nigeria is $32 billion, so you need an average of 32 unicorns to solve these issues for them. But the good thing is, with the coming of more fintechs in the space, we'll have faster decisions to credit. People are building, for instance, we at Trade Lender, we are building around AIs, smart algorithms, such that we can make faster credit decisions to these SMEs. And I believe these are things that would effectively assist the MSMEs to get more fundings in this year. Also, there's a lot more focus around private sector. And I think late last year, around December last year, we heard of partnerships between the IFC, the BOI, and the likes. All coming together, thinking of ways to support more SMEs. So yeah, this year we should have more fundings going to these SMEs. Yeah.
And taking you back to artificial intelligence, helping with companies that give out credit to give out funds quicker. How exactly is that going to work with AI?
Okay, so AI is one important thing in achieving this will be data. So fintechs need to gather a lot of data, work around a lot of data, train their systems through machine learning, through artificial intelligence, train their systems to follow certain smart algorithms, and train their systems to make decisions based on certain metrics. But you can only train the system by by training the system with large data. So there's a need for a large data. So more fintechs need to gather as much data as they can to train their system, and that way they'll be able to make more decisions. But today, yeah, we are starting to see various fintechs build various policies, various frameworks that they are using to train their system.
All right, what are startup trends do you think we should expect in 2023 for Africa?
Okay, I think it's been an interesting one. 2020 to date, we've experienced growth when it comes to the startup trend. More fundings have come to Africa. From 2021, we had just about $4 billion coming to Africa. It's increased to about $5.3 billion in 2022. But for Nigeria, it dropped. It dropped from about $1.32 billion in 2021 to $1.2 billion in 2022. But the good thing is 2023 presents us more opportunities across Africa, even in Nigeria. We've seen more Nigerian companies and African companies get into global accelerators. We've seen more interest from global VCs from all the blocks, from the American blocks, from the Euro bloc, from the Asian bloc, all interested in African companies and getting into and funding African companies. So definitely we should have more fundings coming in. And recently also, interestingly, a lot more companies in the US are talking about diversity, are talking about funding women-led companies, funding Black-led companies. So yeah, this year across Africa, in Nigeria, we should have more funding coming and more support for startups. Yeah. And I think the government also should find ways. Oh yeah, and late last year, we had the startup bill that came in, that was signed. So that should also support more SMEs, or we should start enjoying the fruits of that this year.
All right, well, we'll keep tracking the trends there in 2020. Thank you so much. That was Shina Arugundade, CEO, Trade Lender. It was great having your perspective today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah.